Welcome. So today we're going to look over the Maya graph editor and how we can use it in our animation. So the first thing that I'm going to do here is I'm going to set up my windows in Maya so that I have my graph editor open and ready to use. I currently have two windows, two panels stacked on top of each other. You can change those panels by just middle click on the options on the side here, and you can see that you can change single pan, two pans side by side, or other various options of that. You can also save current layout, or you can edit a layout, and you can also make custom ones. See, here's a custom one that has David, that's my name, that I use quite frequently when I animate. Okay, so right now I'm using the two pans stacked, and in the bottom panel I'm actually going to flip this over. I'm going to go under panels to panel, and I'm going to turn this into the graph editor. Okay, so here's the basic graph editor. Don't worry about this bar at the bottom. This bar is connected to AnimBot, okay, which is something which is a separate plugin that I will discuss at a later date. We're going to be focusing on just what's up here and how we can utilize it for our animation. Okay, so we can't see anything here at first. We have our channel box, we have our basic menu set, and we have our status line with the different various tools and tangent options that we can use when we animate. So before we can do anything in here, we have to have some keys to work with. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put some basic animation on one of these spheres here. Okay, so I'm going to go down here and I'm going to hit S, set a key, and you can see as soon as I set a key, the channel box is populated with the different various channels or axis directions that we have available for our object. Okay, so these are the translate, which means the arrow options here. They go back and forth, up and down, forward and backwards. Okay, then we have our rotation options. Okay, same thing. And we have our scale options. So I've set a key on each one of those channels right now in our on our timeline here. Okay, that's why we see a key for all of these. Okay, now let's make another key. We'll go down to, let's say we'll go to frame 10 here, and I'm just going to go to my move tool right here, and I'm just going to animate this guy going straight up and down. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this over to an orthotic view. Okay, so let's turn it to our front menu here, just so we get a straight-on view of our objects. Orthotic views are not they don't have any perspective in them. They're completely flat. Okay, so I typically don't animate in orthotic views unless it's for a very specific reason, or I just want to see one direction on an object. Okay, so I'm going to take this object, I'm going to just pop it up here, and you can see that what happened was it automatically created a key here. And the reason it automatically created a key is because this little button here on the side was turned on. That's the auto key button. I can turn that on or off. Red means on, and that means off. Okay, if I have that turned on, it's going to create a key every time I move my object. If I have that turned off, I'll just delete this, and I'll do that again, and you can see that it does not create a key. Now you really got to be aware of when this is not on, because if I do a whole pose on my character and I don't have that function turned on, then I'm gonna if as soon as I move my timeline, you can see it doesn't save anything. Okay, so you could spend an hour working on a really dynamic pose, and then all of a sudden, poof, your pose is gone because you didn't save a key. Okay, so you really got to be aware of that. I'm going to turn that back on because I like having that on when I work. So anytime I move a channel, it automatically keys that channel. Now, the thing that you got to remember is it only keyed that one channel. Okay, so in the channel editor here under Translate Y, you can see that's got a red mark on it, and these are all pink. That means I've keyed that individual channel. Okay, so I can click here, and it'll bring up the Translate X. I'm going to focus in on it. Let me just set that one more time. Sorry, the Translate Y, I should say. Focus in on that, and you can see that I have two keys on Translate Y. Okay, all the rest of these in here only have one key on them. Okay, so I can go through here and I can select all of these, and you can see there is other keys in here. Okay, but not any other keys on frame 10, just on the one that I had the auto key turned on, which was the translate Y option. Okay. Now, there's ways that I can focus in on what tangent I'm looking at. Okay, so for instance, in the channel box, there's an option here that you can use to focus in on the curve that you are looking at. And that can be really handy when there is a lot of curves in your graph editor. Okay, so let's create a few more curves in our graph editor. Let's go to frame 10. I'm going to hit S on the keyboard. Okay, and now you can see that it created all these other curves in here that are connected to these other channels. Okay, when I select them, just by dragging over them, you can see that it highlights them and puts a little square box beside which ones I've grabbed. Now you can see these ones here, it's grabbing all three of these because they're on the exact same value, okay, which in this case is 0. Okay, you can see this one, the value of the translate X position is almost to -6 here. Okay, you can see it's -5.061. All right. Now, in the graph editor, we can focus on what we're looking at. So for instance, if I want to look at just this one, but I have all of them in the graph editor, I can do that by selecting it in here, but I have to set up an option first. If I right click on here and I want to sync the selection in the graph editor, I have to turn that on. Okay, there's a little bug here that, okay, it's going to work now. Sometimes you might find in Maya 2020, 2022, sometimes this option may be a little buggy and you have to turn it on and off twice to get it to work properly. But when that option is turned on, so that there is turned on, okay, you're going to see that whatever I select in my channel box, it's going to focus on in the graph editor, which can be really handy for getting around your graph editor. Okay. Okay, so you can see here that right now it's set up some default tangents for me, and right now this is called an auto tangent. Okay, so that's my default preference right now. All right, now the preferences for tangent types can be found in the preference box, and I can go to Edit, down to Preferences on the graph editor menu, and it's going to take me right to the animation setting in my preferences. Okay, and you can see in the tangents, right now I have non-weighted tangents turned on, auto span, and auto span, and both those are legacy. Okay, so we call these auto tangents. I'm not going to worry about these because to be honest, I never use these. These were introduced in 2022, I believe, but if you find use for them, that's great. I typically don't find use for them. I usually just use the auto span legacy. Okay. Now, obviously, there are other tangent types that we can use, and we'll talk about those in a second. But right now, you can see that my default settings are these here. Okay, so if I ask you to create something in a stepped curve, for instance, you can go in here and you can default set your tangents up to clamped in and stepped out. Okay, and that's going to create what we call a stepped key. But in this case, I'm going to be working just with auto span legacy, auto span legacy. That's going to create auto keys in and out of the tangent. And I'm going to hit save. And what that means is, let's create another key here. So there's my up position, and I'll go to, let's say, frame 20, and I'm going to just drop this back down, and I'm going to just set this to 0. Okay, actually I'm going to set it to 1. I want it to sit on the top there. Okay, so now you can see that I have 3 keys, and this tangent here, you can see that it has an in tangent, which is going in this direction, and an out tangent, which is going out here. Okay, this is the tangent handle. I can select either side of that tangent handle, and I can rotate that tangent handle to change the value of how the curve is going in and out of that tangent. Okay, this is a non-weighted tangent, keep in mind. All right. Now you can also see down here that this has an in tangent right now. We don't have anything going, or sorry, an out tangent I should say. We don't have anything going in here at the moment. But you can see that I can change the value of that out tangent as well. Now, as far as weighted keys are concerned, what that means is you can basically have these tangent handles so that they will scale as well. with weighted tangents, okay? It's a complete preference of how you prefer to work. There's no one way or the other way that's better or worse. You have the option of changing the weight of a tangent by going under curves. You can go down to non-weighted or weighted, or you can, like I said before, go to your preference options and you can set this to non-weighted or weighted as a default whenever you set a key, okay? If I want to change one of these options after I created a tangent, then I can do that by simply going under curves and I can change it to weighted. And you can see that now it's created these little boxes at the end of that tangent handle, okay? And you can see that this curve is now set to what we call weighted tangents. Now weighted tangents can scale in and out, okay? Now what I'm doing there is I'm holding shift down and I'm pulling them in and out with the right mouse button, okay? I can still do all my simple drag and scale at the same time just by tumbling around, holding the right mouse button and tumbling around, okay? If I want to set a value to 0 here, I can simply hold shift and shrink that to a value of 0, and I can do the same with that side, and then I could just simply do a little stretch here to put a little hang time at the top of that curve, okay? Now, don't be confused about what we're looking at here, okay? I know that in a simple ball going up and down, it looks like the ball is going up, like the value of this is going up, and this looks like the arc of the ball, but that's not what we're looking at here, okay? This is very simple, flat graph. Like think mathematics here, okay? Don't think visual aid when you're looking at this, okay? So what we're looking at here is the value of the ball going up in y, which is right here, okay? So as I go up here, you're going to see this number increasing as I go up in value, which means in this case my ball is going higher, okay? And you can see that the height of my ball is 5.664 in value. The values are on the side, the time is on, or the values are vertical and the time is horizontal, okay? So value starts at 1 in this case, goes up to 5.664, and then it's going back down to a value of 1 again. And this is going from frame 1 to frame 10 to frame 20 across this way, okay? Now, if I hit play on this, okay, you're going to see that, let me just set my time slider here to 20 just so it loops for me. Okay, now that's a simple, it doesn't look very weighted right now because it's just very simple. We haven't timed it, we just created 3 keys. Okay, but you can see that we've created a basic bouncing ball. Okay, now let's just switch this back to non-weighted tangents for a second just so you can see the difference. Okay, so I'm just going to take this and I'm going to set this back to non-weighted. Okay, now you can see that it's completely changed the curve of with the look of the curve. Okay, now if I just hit play like this, you can see that the ball looks like it's slowing into the ground and then slowing up at the top and then slowing back into the ground, right? And that's because what's happening is the flat tangent, okay, means that the value of the ball going up is not as extreme at the front here, which means it's going to slow out or ease out, okay? As we get up to the top of the curve, you can see that the slant of the curve is actually getting flatter as well, which means the value is not going to increase as fast, which means we are slowing in, okay? And then the same here when we slow out, because the curve is flatter at this point. And then as we go down here, you can see that the curve flattens out again here, which we get a slow in, okay? So what that auto tangent is giving us is a simple slow in and a slow out at both sides, okay? Now, with non-weighted tangents, we can also create a curve that gives us a better look of a bouncing ball. I can simply take that part of the curve, right mouse, drag, and point that curve upwards. Okay, I could do the same here. and I could shift that curve upwards as well, okay? And what that does is it creates a steeper angle, okay? So it's taking that slow out value and now it's saying, okay, go straight up in value, which means it's going to be much faster visually than it would be if it's slowing out. And that's really important when you're doing computer animation, because if you don't control the value of your curves, okay, you're going to get a lot of animation that looks very kind of slow. It looks like it's going through water almost, because everything is slowing in and slowing out, and it doesn't look very good, okay? So you really got to be aware of the slant of your curves to control the speed of your object, all right? So I can play this, and we're going to go back to something more of what we had last time, okay? A very simple bouncing ball. Now I can always add keys to this curve in order to control that curve more than it is right now. So I don't have to rely on what Maya gives me in here between one frame and frame 10. I go down into here, and as you guys know, I can add breakdowns, right? So I can select my curve, and in this case I want to go to frame 5, and I can insert a key. Now there's a few ways that I can insert a key. I can simply hit S on the keyboard, which would insert a key. I can right click and I can insert a key like this, and I can also use a shortcut key on the hotboard, which is Alt-I to insert a key, okay? Now I can also insert keys on individual curves, okay? So you can see here that I have multiple curves for all these different aspects here. I can hold down Alt, if I go to frame 5 here, I can go Alt, Shift, and then hit R, okay? And it's going to put some keys on the scale value, but not on the rotation or the translate values, okay? If I want to put, let me just take that one off the scales. Okay, I just highlighted those and deleted it. If I want to put a value on the rotations, so let me just highlight everything here. I could do Alt, Shift, E, and it'll just put a key on the rotation values now, okay? I'm going to delete that, and if I want to put a key on, go back there. If I want to put a key on just the translates, then I can go Alt, Shift, and W, and it will add it to my translate values right there, okay? Or if I just want to create just an insert basic key on everything, I can just hit Alt-I. Like I said, inserts it on everything in the scene. Okay, and when we're keying rigs, we are going to want to key everything. So we hit Alt-I, put a key on everything. We don't really want to do individual keys. We want to make sure we're doing sets of keys. So Alt-I is really what you want to do as default. Okay. Now, since we have that, I'm going to go back just to that one curve, and I can manipulate that curve individually. So now I can control on that breakdown key the position of where I want that breakdown to be. So if I want that breakdown to come up here and I want to speed into the top of the arc, I can set that. I could go, let's go to frame 15 here. I could simply set another key right there, and I could do the same thing. Right, and now I'm making a longer hang time at the top of my bouncing ball because it's flattening out, okay? Which means the value is not moving as far between 5 and 15. It's staying very similar, okay? Whereas the value from 1 to 5 and 15 to 20 is much sharper in its angle, which means it's going to go much faster, okay? So if I hit play on that, it's going to go up faster, and it's going to have more hang time at the top. You see that? So that's some of the ways that we can manipulate the basic curves with simple weighted and non-weighted tangents. Okay? Now let's take our animation here, and I'm going to just copy this one channel. So I'm going to grab that, and I'm just going to hit Control-C on the keyboard, and I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to hit Control-V here on this other ball. Now you can see that it's only pasted one channel. Okay, you can see here that this is red and the rest of them are black. That one channel now has a set of keys on it. So if I hit play, it's going to have the exact same animation as the previous ball. Okay. Now let's say I want to change that up to a different tangent type. Well, I can select that curve, and I can use these buttons in here, which allow me to change my curve or my tangent type. Now this is the auto tangent, okay, that we spoke about. That will give you automatic curve settings that will not go over your maximum value. It will stay under what your maximum value of your keys are. In this case, that is your maximum value, this is your minimum value, but it kind of softens everything out. Okay, so there's no jarring motions, right? So if I did this and I go auto, oh, I'm sorry, I gotta hit the right one. Where's my auto? Okay, there's my auto. I must hit the wrong one there. Okay, you can see that now I have that nice auto tangent in there. Now I can change the auto in and the auto out as well if I would like. I'm going to just do it to the whole thing right here. Okay. Now the other thing that I can do is I can go into my tangents and I can change them in my tangent menu. Under here you can see that you have auto, spline, linear, clamped, stepped, flat, fixed, and plateau. Okay, typically all you're going to use is stepped and spline auto and stepped for the most part. There is times where I'll use linear quite often, but usually I'm going to use auto and stepped when I'm working. Stepped when I'm blocking, and auto when I'm splining. And I usually use the auto span legacy function. Okay. Now let's change this ball over to what we call stepped keys. So I'm just going to click stepped right there. And now you can see what's happened is it's changed all these to flat lines. Okay, now what's happening there is the value of the ball is going to stay on the ground until it gets to that next key, and then it's instantaneously going to be transported up to that breakdown key. Okay, and then I'm going to go to my next key, and you can see, boom, it jumps up to the next one. Continue on, boom, it jumps down to that next one, and then same for that final one. Okay, and when I play that, you can see that that looks, the purpose for that is to allow you to work on your basic poses in block form. Okay, so we use that to build out our basic animation in just the basic poses that we want to time out, and then we would get Maya to help or assist us with the in-between work by using the auto spline function, which we'll talk about in more detail at a later point. But that you can see here that is how the stepped key function works. Okay. Now the other keys, the other functions in here would be linear. So I'm going to take my animation here. I'm going to copy it onto the third ball here, and I'm going to change this to the linear handle right here. Okay. You can see here that now I have flat curves all the way through my animation. Okay, we have linear, we have flat, okay, which makes the flat handles all across your animation. We have stepped, and we have plateau. I very rarely use plateau in my animation work. Okay, so that's the ones that you're typically going to use. Flat can be very handy for specific animation needs, which we will look at a later date. And linear can also be very handy if you want something to have a continuous speed up and then a continuous speed the other way. In this case, you can see that it's a very continuous, there's no ease in, ease out at all here. It's just a very kind of flat movement. Okay. If we were to change that over to that spline, you're going to see that it's going to make it a much smoother looking animation. Okay. Now, that covers the basics of our curves. Okay, so let's take a look at just some of the other functions that we have here to get you going. All right, so you have your basic menu options here. We aren't going to go into too many details about all the different functions in these because we'll kind of go through those one at a time as needed to show you what we need. But your curve menu here covers a number of different options here. Like I said, your weighted options, your infinity looping options, isolate curves. You can just isolate one curve at a time. baking curves, muting curves. All these functions we'll go into a little more in depth at a later time. The key options, you can set up, you can mute keys, you can create keys, you can add insert tool, things like that. Tangent option is very important. It has all your tangent options in here as we just talked about. The other things here, the show menu, you can show all curves in your curve editor here. So if I select this one here and I just want to see, for instance, just the Y, I could go to the show menu and I could show just selected types and it would show me just that one there. But I'd have to make sure that I turn that on or I won't see the other curves any other time. Okay. This one here is our panel menu, which we talked about before, which allows us to switch to different types of viewport panels. In this case, we're looking at our graph editor, okay? But we can switch this panel out to any other thing, okay? Some of the other things that we can turn on or off is we can turn on options to break our handles, okay? So for instance, if I want to select the top handle, I can click break, and then I can grab either side of the handle and I can break it. And I can also use the next function here to put it back together. So now it moves as a whole again. Okay, I don't want to break that though, I want to keep that linear. We're not going to get into all of these right now because we don't need them, but these two handles here, or these two options here, allow you to snap horizontally and vertically, and you always want to have your horizontal snap turned on because you want to be able to, if you're going to select a key and hold down shift and drag it back and forth, you want to make sure that you're snapping to whole numbers. Okay, very important. All right, again, we're not, like I said, we're going to go through more of this stuff at a later date. I just want to give you the basics today so you can get working in your graph editor. Okay, now some of the other things that you can do is you can look at your viewport in 3 different ways. You can look at it in, let me see here if we can show the menu. We have absolute view, we have stacked view, and we have normalized view. So right now we're looking at the absolute view, which is showing us the exact value of and time that our curves are going to be manipulated in. If we hit number 2 on the keyboard, we can look at stacked view, which takes the value out of the equation and just shows you every curve in your graph editor in a stacked way. So I'm literally looking at each one of these without any value attached to it. And the normalized view, if you have like a value, like extreme value way up like this, you can normalize things to show them in relative position to each other. Okay, so that might be something that may be very handy if you have curves that have extreme values from one to the other. The normalized view will put them into a position where they're easier to read. Okay, I'm just going to undo that. And I'm going to go back to my absolute view. I typically always use the absolute view, number 1, when I'm looking at my work. And now you have the theme option here, which means you can go dark, light. You can put different themes in here. I always keep mine on the dark setting. Okay. And then you have the stats. Okay, so you can look at if I selected this particular key here, you can see that that's set on frame 5, and then you have the value of that key as well. And there's many other mathematical functions that you can do with the stats that we can look at a later time. Okay, basic functionality for navigation is the same as your graph editor. So if I just have the move tool selected, I go in here, I can hold down Alt, and I can right mouse drag around, or middle mouse drag around, and I can zoom in and out just like I would in a regular viewport. Okay, or I can grab that and I can zoom in on it with F, and that gives me my basic functionality. Okay, so those are the basics right now. We will go over some more at a later date, but if you have any questions, let me know and I'd be happy to help you. Thank you.